तीन क्वेश्चन पे तुक्का मारा था C and all three were right. Had all three been wrong, I would have not been in IIM Ahmedabad. 2009 June, I'm sitting, I'm jobless. I have 7,000 rupees in my account, nothing to tell my father, right? Have not sit in placements. And I have a French girl who, like, now the problem is we are both on the street, abhi usko bhi protect karna hai na. So if in the first 2, 3, 4 years you don't cash on your B school ka tag, then you are standing, you find yourself standing next to the B schools jo jinka mazak banate the. You know that you are not Bhagat Singh, right? So then what do? You speak your mind, but you still, you have to make a living. Bombay, it can be very, very troubling. Because Bombay, you live in Chembur, your office is in Goregaon. You are going to suffer 1 hour of traffic jam on JVLR, okay? And that is your life. And your joys are कि यार मैंने ना automatic गाड़ी ले ली है, अब मेरे को ब्रेक नहीं मारना पड़ता. Many people go to MBA precisely because they want to escape technology, right? कि यार नहीं होगा यार अपने से engineering. But अगर आपके पास accidentally or otherwise वो चीज़ है कि you are an engineer, right? Or you have had some experience in software development, don't lose it. Because उसकी वैल्यू पॉसिबली MBA से ज़्यादा है.
Okay, awesome.
Welcome, Tanuj. Thank you for being here. You know, I'll be very honest, when I was reading about you and I was actually looking at you, the first thing that appeared when I did a Google search was not the LinkedIn account that usually people who are from IMA or, in the corporate world comes up. The first thing that came was a writer and your association with your books and the 4 books that you have written, right? We will talk about all of this in this particular conversation, but help me understand, Tanuj, as a person, as a human being, as an individual, how was the beginnings?
I was born in Muzaffarnagar, Uttar Pradesh, right? And so my father worked in Uttar Pradesh government's sugarcane research vibhag, right? And that is also something that takes time to explain कि उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार एक गन्ने की रिसर्च का विभाग चलाती है. तो उसमें मेरे father, I think he started, I'm not too sure about this, he started as a class 3 employee, class 2 or class 3. तो एक ज़माना था जब I think he was a lab assistant practically, right? कि वो गन्ना आता था इधर उधर से, किसी में कुछ बीमारी है, किसी में कुछ है, और उसका कुछ प्रयोग वो करते थे. I've seen those laboratories, they look like circus में जैसे वो होता है ना, एक फॉर्मल्डिहाइड में रखे पार्ट्स जैसे एक्सपोज किए जाते हैं, उस टाइप की एक लेबोरेटरी थी, उसमें मेरे पिताजी काम करते थे. एंड आई थिंक सो ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम ही सॉर्ट ऑफ गॉट प्रोमोटेड एटसेट्रा. इवेंचुअली रिटायरमेंट के आसपास आते आते आई थिंक ही हैड रीच्ड क्लास 1. बट आई रिमेंबर वेरी क्लियरली अ टाइम व्हेन आई थिंक हिज मंथली पे वाज 12,000 and my fees in the best school in Muzaffarnagar was around 3,000 to 4,000, right? So it was a hardcore investment, as if that this is the guy who is going to take us into the post-liberalization world, right? Because my parents, of course, have lived in the or come of age in the pre-91, 92 part. For him, it was lucky that I had a certain appetite for reading, for school ka kaam, etc., right? So had I been from a different background, I think I most certainly would have quit physics, chemistry, maths after 10th or so, because my interest was in languages, Hindi and English. So had I come from a more privileged background, I think I'd probably be a Delhi University ka student in English, BA, MA honors, and then have become a writer, rather than the route that I eventually had to take, right? Because practically for me growing up, there was absolutely no other choice. I hear that it is still true for people of your generation, right? So there's actually no choice. Unless you come from certain caste groups in India where a BCom is okay, practically you end up doing a BTech, right? BA वाले तो एक आध, मतलब हमारे यहाँ IIM अहमदाबाद में BA वाले जो लड़का या लड़की पहुँचते थे वो हमारे लिए दुर्लभ होते थे कि BA करके IIM में कैसे आ गया यार कोई. Aside BTech, and then there is this thing in you, right? You are very, very competitive because everything you have to go grab, right? So I was very, very competitive. At 17, I got into NIT Jaipur, so my engineering is from NIT Jaipur. The common usual disappointments, they are IIT and all that. So that persisted for 5-6 months. That usually vanishes as soon as you make friends in the first semester in engineering. And at 21, I was inside IMA.
मुझे एक इंटरेस्टिंग बात आपको पूछनी है. आई मीन यू सेड दैट फिजिक्स केमिस्ट्री मैथ was not something that was your forte, और आपको पता था कि you will not pursue it further. So when did this change come? Was it like a forced change that came to you, that you felt like नहीं इसी में career बनाना है, या फिर I have seen people who actually have made a mark हमारे गांव से, they have actually done engineering, तो उनको अच्छी नौकरी मिली तो पापा ने बोला या फिर ताऊ जी ने बोला कि ये करना है तो हमें करना है.
It is in engineering that you realize that a certain kind of faculty that is required to be a very good engineer, right? So being an average engineer it doesn't really count, frankly speaking. You end up in Infosys or a TCS copying code from one place and pasting it in elsewhere. And I think some of you have done that, so don't take me wrong, my brother has done that. But I realized that that is the path I'm headed towards, right? And it was a bit surprising that most of my batchmates in IIT Jaipur actually were aiming for that path. 2007, I think they were paying 3 lakh rupees per annum. I think they're still broadly paying the same. And by 2007, them paying 3 lakh rupees was already 10 years old, right? So it's basically been the same for around 15-20 years. And I was like, 3 lakh rupees, kabhi lagta tha ki yaar 20,000 rupees in your pocket, it will be nice, right? And it was very clear that I would just walk into TCS or Infosys का interview, 100 लोग लेके जाएंगे, अब इतने बुरे हम हैं नहीं, हमारा हो ही जाएगा यार. Season or the placement conversation started to happen, I realized ये तो नहीं होगा यार. And then also, because you are not culturally very adept, right? Because you have been straitjacketed in engineering, और engineering के बाद जो अच्छे लड़के थे दिल्ली बम्बई के, वो सब CAT की तैयारी कर रहे थे, ठीक है? अब incidentally, I was good in English, right? So I had a natural sort of thing for the verbal sections, and I used to outscore those metro guys, at least in the verbal sections. And so I realized that इनका अगर CAT का होगा selection, तो अपना हो जाएगा. It's not a very tough exam, right? So that's when I decided, let's see यार, let's पैसे कमाते हैं चलो, right? And why go to TCS or Infosys? Let me just become a big MBA and I'll earn some money.
That's something very interesting you said, that कि 20,000 रुपए तो मिल रहे थे. So leaving that 20,000 rupees, was that a big choice for you at that point in time in your life? Was your family looking up to you, that saying that अभी पढ़ाई वढ़ाई बहुत हो गई, अभी छोड़ दो? Or was it a struggle for you to convince them also that I want to go and do an MBA?
No, I think so. My father by then was not a lab technician anymore, right? He was plant pathologist and then senior plant. So his profile had also improved at work. There was not a dire need of 20,000 rupees every month, right? Secondly, if you sell the story that मैं CAT करूँगा और मैं IIM में जाऊँगा, तो then your parents are like, चल यार कर लेना. And the third thing is, I never took a break, right? So I didn't take a break after 12th to prepare for engineering. I didn't take a break after engineering to prepare for CAT. मेरा साथ में ही हो गया. So my final semester के पहले there was उस टाइम CAT वैसे होता था पेपर पे. So हो गया, वो CAT दिया, so we all of us came out, and the quant section was very easy that year, and the English was the toughest, and it was my sort of CAT, right? So quant में I did very well, but English में तो everyone collapsed, and so 33 out of 100, and I was still able to get 99.5 or something. It was a crazy English exam that year, and 3 question पे तुक्का मारा था, C, and all 3 were right. Had all 3 been wrong, I would have not been in IIM Ahmedabad. So like, Bhagwan ka naam liya, this statement is a judgment or an inference or a this or a that. It was very complicated. And everyone else I talked to, who my friends who gave the CAT that year, everyone else got at least 2 wrong. And so I was lucky.
You mentioned that ये metro वाले बच्चे CAT की तैयारी कर रहे थे. So interestingly, you were not the metro kid who probably was the part of that particular batch. How was your life at IIM Ahmedabad like? When you actually went in there, did you feel like you are out of place? Did you feel that, आ तो गए हैं, अभी पता नहीं ये 2 साल निकलेंगे कैसे? या फिर it was a smooth joyride for you at that particular place?
Oh, it was an absolute culture shock, because NIT Jaipur is socially a very different construct, right? A different kind of place. NITs, I don't know how they do it right now, but NITs used to have state-wise allocation of seats. So the Rajasthan people would have 50% of the seats. I think the UP guys had around, I'm from UP, so UP guys had around 22 or 28 seats, okay? And then immediately you get into this very weird comparative thing, right? That for me, a UP guy, to get into computer science, I have to get All India rank 2306. But for a Gujarat guy, the rank can be 80,000, right? So you get into this weird, complex dynamic. And then there was this added layer in NIT Jaipur that there were caste-based groups, right? So मीना अलग होते थे, जाट अलग होते थे, उनकी रैगिंग भी वही लेते थे, right? So it's a very complex social environment where 1500 to 2000 people are there and it's socially very different. And you were more or less secured that आखिरी दिन पढ़ाई करेंगे तो you will clear the exam, right? And it was dominated by boys, right? So the number of girls was very small and they were segregated and there were greater curfews on girls, right? So imagine this sort of very repressive setup, right, and somewhat retrograde in terms of its social dynamic. And then you enter IIM Ahmedabad, flat, there is, so people talked a different language and it was so competitive, the first trimester. It was a period from hell. Okay, and you would study all night, etc. वो आदत छूट गई थी क्योंकि इंजीनियरिंग में तो मस्ती की 4 साल. So then to get back into that, and you are not trained in accounts. So you can probably take a shot at Schrodinger's equation, but you can't balance a balance sheet, right? And that is what you learned in the first trimester. Especially guys who are in engineering and entering into MBA ना, वो पहला trimester semester में accounts का पेपर आएगा वो हिलेगा ही नहीं. आपको नहीं आने वाला वो समझ में. अभी से पढ़ लो या तो, ठीक है? तो मेरा C आया था उसमें. And C is pretty much a lousy grade in IIM Ahmedabad. It was a culture shock, and but then you attune yourself because who are you? You're 21 years old, right? So you are very very adaptable. You realize यार अपना position किधर है, right? Like in NIT Jaipur, you are among the top 5% maybe, right? Academically, culturally, and all that. Here you are somewhere in the middle, right? And then you make your peace with that, and then you say, okay, in a batch of 250 IIM Ahmedabad people, I think I am around 180, okay? And that is still good because that is 180 out of 1.5 lakh.
So a lot of people say that, when you get into an institute like this, an MBA, you probably spend a lot of time in extracurricular activities, networking with people, doing all sorts of things along with your studies, and that is what makes or breaks your career, because आगे जाके आपको इन्हीं लोगों के साथ काम करना पड़ेगा, different companies में जाएंगे, आप network करोगे, उनसे मिलोगे, काम निकलवाओगे. Were you good at it?
No, and in IIM Ahmedabad, you at least have the luxury to think that even if I don't do it, where I land up, it will be all right, yeah. Right? Even if I'm uncomfortable going out to every alumni meet, every meet and greet, etc., I will still go to placements and I will get a job. It will be fine. So you had that, you kind of settle into your own comfort zone. At least I was like that. There were a lot of other IIMA people who were and still are, like go for it, go for it. I was not built that way. So I like talking to people, but I suffer when I have to do that with an agenda inside my head.
How much of that two states life is true for IIM Ahmedabad?
First of all, the IIMs have rightfully, I think, taken some measures to increase the number of women in campuses. IIM Bangalore was the first one to do that. And it is absolutely necessary. In that time, I was a different person, and I used to think, "Arey yaar, ye to merit se hota hai, yaar, ye to galat kar rahe," right? But it is so absolutely necessary because out of 250 people in IIM Ahmedabad in my batch, 89 were from IITs, right? Around, I think, an equal number or so were from other engineering schools. So you are dominated by engineering group, right? Where लड़के हैं ज़्यादातर. अच्छा, उन्होंने 4 साल में पहले भी 17 से 21 कोई लड़की नहीं देखी है, ठीक है? अब वो उसको 22 साल का उम्र में भी you give him the same ratio, right? You create a very very intelligent but a very stunted individual, right? At 23 you emerge, you have not had any friendly interaction with women at all in your life, right? And especially if you don't have sisters at home, then you have not interacted with women. And so a lot of these IIT IIM people, right, from my generation or before, they're absolutely schmucks when it comes to questions of equality, gender equality. I mean, they don't understand the concept क्योंकि वो training नहीं है. So IIMs realized that. I think IIM Bangalore was the first one, and I think that has started to change. In my time, I think the ratio was very, very skewed, and some people were lucky to fall in love and all. So I also fell in love with someone in IIM Ahmedabad. And so that happens, the two-state thing, yeah, it happens. Because there you are not dating thinking, yaar, ye Punjabi hai kya? Right, you're just dating.
Okay, let's move to Ahmedabad गए. फिर आपको कब लगा that now probably is the time when I should look for jobs यार? मतलब अभी बहुत time पढ़ाई हो गई है. Now probably घर वाले भी बोल रहे हैं. Was it like that kind of a situation? Internship कहाँ की आपने?
This is the time where a series of bad decisions and which I have a particular proclivity for. So even now, it's been 2009, 14 साल हो गए हैं. So every 4 or 5 years, I'll take a terrible decision. Okay, like a terrible financial call. And the first one was taken in IIM Ahmedabad, second year. I fell in love. I fell in love with a French dual degree student. Okay. And so she has weird notions about Hindustan, right? So she wants to join Teach for India. And अब हम तो प्यार में पागल. And what kind of a guy am I? I am from Muzaffarnagar, right? पहले तो औरत नहीं देखी थी. अब I am dating a French woman, right? So she basically governs my life, and she governed it for a good 4 or 5 years. And so I was like, damn it, man! I am Ahmedabad. I'll get a job. Let me follow her. So I actually joined Teach for India. Okay, and Teach for India was paying how much? 20,000 rupees per month. So then you have to accept what comes with love, right? Sometimes these kind of things can happen to you when you are in love. So we joined, and the amazing thing is that 2 months later, the TFI guys realized that both of us are not made for TFI, so we get fired. We are probably the only TFI people who have been fired by TFI. And for good reason. I mean, I think I'm being recorded, so I'll say, yeah, for a good reason, both me and my girlfriend are fired. And so 2009 June, I'm sitting, I'm jobless. I have 7,000 rupees in my account, nothing to tell my father, right? Have not sit in placements. And I have a French girl who, like, now the problem is we are both on the street, अभी उसको भी protect करना है ना. उसको घर तो चाहिए ना, या वो सड़क पे तो नहीं घूम सकते ना दोनों के दोनों. So that was the most difficult year of my life in the sense. But I was mostly jobless. I came to Gurgaon because I IIM Ahmedabad friends in Gurgaon. They were Bain Consulting में थे मेरे 3-4 जिगरी दोस्त. So there was a time when both me and my girlfriend, we stayed in their house's living room for months.
What was the fees of IIM Ahmedabad?
For my batch was the last batch which enjoyed 4.5 lakh rupee fees for 2 years. In the very next batch, it became, I think, 16 for 2 years. And now I think it's 25, 28, something like that.
But still, you were jobless for the first year and you had a 4.5 lakh rupees loan.
And I have a loan, okay? So I have a 4.5 lakh rupee ka loan because my father hasn't paid a penny. And I'm 1 year jobless. वो 1 year का moratorium था जिसमें interest नहीं लगा, तो बच गए. But yeah, it was a disastrous financial decision.
Right. So then, when did things, get back on track? Where did you think that probably finances are important in life, and probably you should get a job?
I mean, when I ran out of money, which happened very quickly in 2009, right? And there came a point where my girlfriend, so we were living in Gurgaon, and she took up the role of tutor for certain expat families' children based in Delhi. She was the one who was bringing in money like that, and I was trying to give verbal classes, vocabulary classes to some GMAT, GRE schools, I forget which ones. And so there was some meager inflow of money, which was all right, but then when you don't have money, you realize that you need money, right? So that was pretty basic. And IIM Ahmedabad, if you were able to prove that you had done entrepreneurial activity after your MBA, you can return to placement the next year or the next to next year. The rules, I think, are stricter now. They ask you to show you your self-proprietorship का कागज दिखाओ, या LLP का कागज दिखाओ, या क्या किया दिखाओ. That time it was just a nascent idea, right? I think we were the only 2 people in the batch who exercised that option. Saying, December में हमको clarity आ गया था कि boss लग गई, right? And so Feb या March में पता नहीं कब placement होता था. So we decided, both of us, saying we want to go back to campus. And there was a bit of an argument with the placement committee because they said, boss, you never told us that you were doing entrepreneurial activity, right? How do we believe you, right? So then we had done some maskari बीच में, उसका कुछ कागज वागज दिखा के, and practically pleading, saying, please जाने दो, वापस placement में बैठने दो. So we returned, and she got McKinsey, and I got Edelweiss, and the offices were in Bombay in the same building. So McKinsey was 22nd floor, and I would be on the first floor. So my life was set, and I live in Bombay, Bandra, paying, I think, 1/3 of my salary as rent. 1/3 of my salary as rent. Why? Because I have a French girlfriend and she can't live in Goregaon, right? So she has to live in Bandra. So this was the second financially awkward decision.
So Edelweiss happened. What sort of role was it? Were you coming to terms with, अच्छा ठीक है, अभी यही जिंदगी होने वाली है, अभी यही करना पड़ेगा? Was it a hardcore sales kind of a job that you took up? क्या हो रहा था in your life at that time?
So it was an Edelweiss capital job, and Edelweiss, it's practically a financial services company that does everything except a bank, and unfortunately they haven't been given the banking license, right? So they were at that time opening a life insurance company. So my contract initially was with Edelweiss Capital, but it was made clear to me that I had an entrepreneurial streak of mind. I think they got the impression because Teach for India gets fired, does this, it takes a 1 year entrepreneurial break. So the interviewer thought, yaar, ye to entrepreneur banda hai yaar. तो इसको तो हम जो नया बिजनेस चालू कर रहे हैं ना उसमें डालते हैं. So I was told this in the interview कि we are starting an insurance company, 550 crore capital, and you join. When I joined, it was fantastic because the company did not even have a license to operate, right? So they were setting up. And so what are they doing? They're deciding how many branches we'll open. And I think there were not a great number of people in the company at that time. So I must have been around the 30th, 40th or person in the company to join. And so there was easy access to the CEO, to the Japanese executive director. So daily baat hota tha. And, but there was no operations. So there's no quarterly pressure or monthly pressure कि sales नहीं हुआ, ये नहीं हुआ, कुछ नहीं था. For me, it struck a perverse chord in me, right? Because काम इतना नहीं था. And I've just lived a year where I had no income after MBA. Suddenly I have a monthly income, right? And I live in wherever I live in Bombay. And I actually don't have to work a great deal at my workplace. I mean, there isn't even 8 hours of work. And bear in mind, I'm 23 or 24, right? So I'm pretty young. This is my first job ever. And in my mind, I think the perverse learning that settled in was that maybe corporate life is like this, which again led in the future, of course, to further bad financial decisions and so on.
How long did the Edelweiss stint last for you? You were saying that there were further financial decisions that you have taken that backfired in your case. So what were these decisions? So
now I'm 5 months unemployed. The woman has left, gone from my life. My total savings after 2.5 years of Edelweiss of ठीक ठाक पैकेज, मतलब आज NMI-MS से निकल के जो पैकेज मिलता है एवरेज, वो मेरा उस टाइम था, राइट? 10-12 साल पहले. My total savings is 90,000 rupees. So I'm done, right? This is 2012 and I have 90,000 rupees in my pocket. And अभी जो IIM Ahmedabad का sheen है, that has started to wear off, right? Because if in the first 2, 3, 4 years you don't cash on your B school ka tag, then you find yourself standing next to the B schools जिनका आप मजाक बनाते थे, right? So you start getting stood up next to that guy, and you realize that guy is good because he's actually worked the last 3 years, right? You were having masti. So she was in Geneva, but incidentally she had worked for some company in the Kotak group, and so she forwarded my CV to the Kotak group, and then I got into Kotak. So lifesaver जाते जाते वो बंदी मेरे लिए ये काम करके गई कि मेरा CV उसने forward किया कोटक में, और मेरी फिर कोटक में नौकरी लगी.
फिर कोटक वाली जर्नी चलती रही. That did not stop. I think
उसका रीज़न है ना. So now I begin to realize that I have been taking really bad decisions, right? And so now I have a job, and I decide I am not going to leave this job, right? And so I worked in Kotak for 9 years. No, I'm still working in Kotak. It's been 10 years.
Insurance is a kind of a place where आपको हमेशा अपने आप से सवाल करना पड़ता है कि यार मैं ये जो चीज़ बेच रहा हूँ, how good is it for the person that I'm selling it to, and how good is it for the company that I'm working at? And it's the dilemma that you always have, right? And that's the space that India per se, the market that we have, always existed, always had, and will always probably have in the future as well. So how did you find that balance, the moral balance there in this sector?
There is something fundamentally wrong with capitalism itself, right? Like if you go to a shoe store, right, and you ask that shoe store कि यार जूता दिखाओ, और आपका नंबर अगर 9 है और उसके पास 8.5 का है, तो वो जान लगा देगा आपको 8.5 का बेचने के लिए, राइट? वो आपको ये नहीं बोलेगा कि बराबर वाली दुकान में चेक कर लो 9 का मिल जाएगा, राइट? नहीं बोलेगा ना, because this is how it operates, right? It's for profit. So that guy is trying to sell a shoe. If you understand or accept this fundamental thing in capitalism, right, then an insurance company is selling a product which is a savings product, which is not even a true insurance product, right? And where the IRR, अभी तो फिर भी ठीक है, products में काफ़ी अच्छा है in fact, till last year, where the IRR is sometimes even 4%, right? So if you understand the fact that capitalism में जूते वाला 9 नंबर के जूते के लिए आपको बाजू में नहीं भेजेगा, and that is what insurance company is doing here. I am selling you a 4.5% IRR product and I am not going to tell you that there are better products in the market. Did I miss-sell to you? No. I told you इतना मिलेगा साहब, इतना पैसा दोगे, इतना पैसा मिलेगा. आपने लिया स्वेच्छा से. अगर आप वो चीज़ एक्सेप्ट कर लो, तब तो on the ethical spectrum you are somewhere in the middle, you are all right, right? There is of course mis-selling, as the way the regulator understands it or the government understands it, where you say very silly things like 50,000 रुपया दो 5 लाख बन जाएगा, right? On which there is a nearly criminal sort of things can happen, right, in insurance, but that is not a big problem in the industry as far as I understand. So it's ethically all right as every other capitalist endeavor is.
And probably because of your startup कीड़ा that probably everybody had seen, उन्होंने आपको ये भी मौका दिया कि जो digital business है कोटक लाइफ इंश्योरेंस का, उसको भी आप lead करो. So what was that experience like? When was this happening in your life? How did you kind of maneuver through this phase where you were building something which was digital, which was up and coming in India, and where people probably would have to now go through a digital interface and not see someone in person selling them insurance?
So I got into digital in Kotak after the first year of my career in Kotak, right? And the only reason I got it was because I was a Big B school grad. I was young, and so whoever wanted to assign someone the position or the task of running digital, they wanted a young guy to do it, right? And preferably a guy from a decent or Big B school, right? So I was just there. I was the only guy around, and I also am a computer science BTech, right? So maybe I innately understand the software development life cycle. I have some familiarity with code, have written code, etc. So I think these things spoke in my favor, and I got it, right? So I didn't have to fight for it. It just landed in my lap. So I'm in the life insurance industry. It's very, very different from general insurance or health insurance, largely because those are annual contracts, and life insurance can be a 40-50 year contract. But life insurance may, despite last 13-14 years of whatever's happened on the digital space, it is still a sold category, and people prefer to buy it from a person rather than buying it directly from a website, right? 3% is the cut that directly happens, and where Policy Bazaar is the biggest player, right? But yeah, it's still agents होते हैं, insurance agents, आपके घर परिवार में होंगे LIC के agent, ये वो मामा फूफा सबके होते हैं. वैसे ही बिकता है हिंदुस्तान में इंश्योरेंस, और एटलीस्ट मेरे ख्याल से अगले 20-25 साल तो ऐसे ही बिकेगा.
When did your work start to become political in nature? And do you see Diwali in Muzaffarnagar to be your most political book so far?
That's a very loaded question. You put two people inside a room, there is some politics happening. You put three, I think it increases not linearly, it increases exponentially. You put four, it's much higher. Right now, the politics is limited to 1, 2, and 3 entities. But you go in that group, and in that group, the dynamics emerge, right? It is not possible to write stories or to tell stories that are not political. It is just not possible because you have people inside. So even in near noon, right? So it is political, right? Why does this guy for this particular pleasure have to go to Thailand? Why is this pleasure not available in India? What prohibits prostitution being legalized in India? Right? Is it legal in Thailand? Actually, it is not legal in Thailand. So how does an activity which is not legal in Thailand, how does it end up being so rampant that the police doesn't care about it, etc.? You think none of these questions are political, right? They're all political. Diwali in Muzaffarnagar, if I go on this line of thought, Diwali in Muzaffarnagar is maybe less political, right? Muzaffarnagar is the district that saw the last big communal riots. Riots bolna usko galat hai because riots means two parties fighting equally against each other, right? What happened in Muzaffarnagar was one party, and then it was like a pogrom, right? Very similar to what happened in Delhi, right? So Delhi, it is not a fight between equals. And I didn't write about the events in Muzaffarnagar. Although the book was written after those events arguably had a big impact on the 2014 election, at least in western Uttar Pradesh and surrounding areas, in how the mandate turned out, right? Certain caste groups which till now or till 30-40 years back were not even sure of being Hindus, right? For example, the Jats, right? They completely radicalized and they practically became very, very Hindu, at least in Muzaffarnagar. which is a process which started during the Babri Masjid time, etc. I wrote about none of this, right? But the shadows of these events are all there in the stories in Diwali in Muzaffarnagar. So you do things like that. I didn't write about them directly because they are not my experience. Then if I have to tackle those events, then I have to do a lot of research, right? And machine learning is based on workplace politics and the politics around what will AI do to jobs, and is it going to be a good thing, a bad thing? It is set again in an insurance company. The last one, Manjhi's Mayhem, is about a Dalit immigrant worker in Bombay who is a security guard, right? Immigration, caste, they are big loaded issues. So I don't think I can write something which is completely dissociated from politics.
Let me ask you this then. What is your thought about India, the politics in India right now, the kind of freedom that we have right now, and what do you see as the future of freedom to do things and think freely in India?
Everyone is interested in my answer, I hope, or at least in the question. 6 or 7 big countries, right, have not been on a very, very good path for a long time. India is one of them. The US, Brazil, China, I mean, you could argue forever it's not been on a good path, right? And Turkey and a few others. Now, interesting things have started happening lately, right? Trump, they kicked out in the US, and there is some level of sanity today. We can argue whether that sanity operates only for Americans or does it even operate for us, right? Bolsonaro, they kicked out in Brazil. Erdogan, I think till last week, I don't know what happened in the election, but it was very, very close, the election. Which other, China में तो कुछ हो नहीं सकता. तो और एक हमारा है, right? And हमारा में, I think we kind of know what will happen in 2024, right? Like we kind of have an idea. And the problem with that is not that this thing will continue. The problem with that is that all the countermeasures against it are decimated, right? So you practically don't have mass media. The sad situation is not the people who govern us, because the people who govern us, third world country, यार वो जो है, ठीक है, वो वैसे ही आदमी मिलेगा, वो कांग्रेस भी ले आओगे तो ज़्यादा मेरे ख्याल से डिफरेंस नहीं है, right? But you need media. You need guarantees that the election commission will always stay independent. You need someone at least talking about the CBI being independent, the ED being independent. नहीं तो CBI ED जो कर रहे हैं वो सबको पता है वो. The problem with those who on WhatsApp groups support the ruling dispensation is that they have started to gloat about these things, right? They have started to gloat about the fact that एक छापा पड़वा दिया ना साहब ने ED का. So यार, you are a citizen of this country, right? You are gloating about the fact that the ruling power did something wrong. कल तेरे साथ हो सकता है भाई ED का छापा. अब वो एक Xiaomi में चाइनीज़ कंपनी में जो CEO बने, शायद यहीं रहते हैं, कहाँ रहते हैं मुझे नहीं पता. अब जैन साहब हैं कोई, I don't know him, बट मैं तो अखबार में ही पढ़ा था कि उनके गले तक आ गए थे. तो उसकी गलती क्या है कि वो चाइनीज़ कंपनी में CEO है. अब वो करते हैं गलत कुछ या नहीं करते हैं मुझे नहीं पता. बट द सिटीजन ऑफ इंडिया एंड स्पेशली the upper caste, upper mid class, middle class ही कहेंगे उसको, upper middle class, कुछ upper middle class में तो अंबानी भी अपने आप को upper middle class ही कहता है. तो वहाँ बहुत distortion है, right? क्यों है? Because liberal arts education का आपके यहाँ कोई mechanics है नहीं. तो engineer वही है कि there is a gender issue in most of your educational institutes. So you produce an army of people who are not gender sensitized and have had no exposure to arts. So they are very, very good analytically, but they take very, very stupid political calls. Like, you know, religion के नाम पे इकट्ठा हो जाओ, ये मार दो, वो कर दो, etc. So even the educated people do that in India.
Life में एक dichotomy probably हमेशा आती रही होगी, या फिर आती है, या फिर आपको ये बोला जाता है कि at one end you are following the capitalist principles in life, where you have a good job, you're a VP at Kotak, you're building for people and everything. And on the other, you're writing these books or you're propagating certain ideas which are quote unquote pessimistic, anti-capitalistic and left-leaning, right? So आप ये dichotomy से बाहर कैसे निकलते हो, and how do you find the courage to do that?
You participate in the economy and in the culture that you are given as an individual, right? There's no escape from it, frankly. Right? I don't become a hypocrite because I work in a for-profit company. While I have reservations about countries becoming for-profit or economies not being welfare states or states not being welfare states, I have deep reservations about that. I am not going to be able to put on a loincloth and walk 3000 kilometers, right, and shave my head off, etc. That much is clear to me. My own personal limits are clear to me, right? I think I've even written in one of my stories that I'm happy to be in yellow pages, right? Those yellow pages rather than being in history books. You know that you're not Bhagat Singh, right? So then what do? You speak your mind, but you still, you have to make a living. You participate in the economy that exists around you, do with whatever you can, right? And so I'm frankly okay with capitalism if it acquires a human face, right? Communism with a human face bolte the, socialism with a human face in Czechoslovakia. That phrase had caught on. That time the number one enemy was communism, right? Communism, socialism, and then the in erstwhile Czechoslovakia, they started doing things better. And I think they called it socialism with a human face, and next thing you know, USSR has sent its tanks to Prague, right? There is a need for capitalism with a human face now, right? Wherein you, theek hai, for profit hai, but there has to be some sort of a welfare state. There has to be some sort of a thought about the fact that real incomes for the bottom 60% in India have declined since 2016 Notbandi. Right? So what is the drama all about? Who's getting richer? Right? So if you lose that sense, if the government is in close cahoots with big business and big business only, then you don't have governance, yaar. You have absolute capitalism, right? Which is not going to be very good because you are never going to be able to buy 9 number ka juta, right?
And why do you think listening to these kind of things is important for this particular cohort who's sitting here and who really look up to कि McKinsey में 40 लाख की salary तक मैं कैसे पहुँचूँ?
So I have seen deeply unhappy people who have very, very good corporate careers, right? Because the feeling, and this usually happens around the age of 35, the feeling that I don't know a lot about the world starts to clasp this person post 35. Right? And उसमें कुछ लोग obfuscate कर लेते हैं उस चीज़ को because 35 is typically in a corporate career also the age when your income becomes higher, your liabilities are also higher, right? 35 to 45 is that sort of phase, right? 25 to 30 you are shifting jobs, trying to figure out what you will do. 30 to 35 you stabilize, after 35 your ESOPs start to materialize and things start to happen, right? But in that group, either because of the fact that 3 लाख रुपए सैलरी आ रही है और 2 लाख रुपए EMI जा रहा है और बच्चे को इंटरनेशनल स्कूल में पढ़ाने का डिसीजन क्यों लिया पता नहीं, like weird things, but that is the ambit of the life, right? And Bombay it can be very, very troubling because Bombay you live in Chembur, your office is in Goregaon, you are going to suffer 1 hour of traffic jam on JVLR, okay, and that is your life, and your joys are कि यार मैंने ना ऑटोमेटिक गाड़ी ले ली है, अब मेरे को ब्रेक नहीं मारना पड़ता, right? And when you talk to these people about things that I talked about, right? They start to understand, and मैं नहीं मिलूंगा तो कोई और मिलेगा, कहीं पेपर में पढ़ेंगे, कहीं ना कहीं उनको पता चलेगा कि दुनिया में और भी दुनिया है जो आपको नहीं पता है. And there is a feeling of deficiency in that person. So it actually leaves you unhappy. Otherwise your world will start closing, narrowing down, and it will end up with you trying to do derivatives trading inside office hours to make 1200 रुपए extra so that आज का पेट्रोल का खर्चा निकल जाए. And I have seen dozens of people like that at VP, senior VP positions because you are always calculating कि आज का खर्चा कितना हुआ और कितने निकाले. Not everyone becomes a CEO यार. तुम इतने सारे लोग बैठो, एक आध पहुँचेगा कोई ऊपर तक, सारे थोड़ी पहुँचोगे. One of you may create a $100 million company, right? One of you, if at all. Likely outcome is nobody will, right? So life cannot be lived with those north stars only ना कि वो north star है बस चलना है जी वहीं पे, और भी तो है जिंदगी.
What are your thoughts about the political startup in India, which is the AAP? How do you see, the Aam Aadmi Party, because you are sitting in Delhi, you can't just not talk about it. And what do you think its future to be? How do you see that playing in the future?
In my community of writers, for example, right, the kind of people that you would call left leaning और यार ये तो थोड़े dubious लोग हैं, कोई वो एक फिल्म डायरेक्टर उसको पिक्चर बनानी नहीं आती, वो अर्बन नक्सल बोलता है, उसका नाम मेरे को नहीं पता है. So in our sort of circle, AAP is still the better option, right? But the problem with AAP is that to our circle, so it is saying now very, very nice things which for the larger electorate, right? So on 370, he will call the Prime Minister a psychopath, Arvind Kejriwal, but on 370 he will tweet saying, "ये तो हम बहुत अच्छा किया, हम देश के साथ हैं," right? Now I don't know what your individual opinions are about 370. Neither do I want to share my opinions, right? But for the larger thing that AAP stood for this guy to actually tweet out his support for Modi ji so loudly was a bit awkward, right? But again, it to someone who, let's say, holds secular credentials very deeply in their heart, right, which is what you would categorize me as, let's say, then I would say, yaar, kyun? Matlab, then you are also losing that card, na? You're becoming a bit like BJP. So what it needs to do is, it can keep on saying these things, but it needs to find a way to pass a message to the people who will actually pay the party, who will actually be the donors, कि we are a party with that heart. वो message अब आना बंद हो गया, शुरू में आता था, ठीक है? It has to find a way to tell this sophisticated, well-read audience of its own also that if we come in the center, relax, we won't be BJP, right? वो बंद कर दिया है आपने, because they are in a direct daily confrontation. So AAP seems to be becoming more and more like BJP. It is of course a much shrewder organization than the Congress and perhaps a lighter organization as well. So they get better outcomes. But हाँ, थोड़ा problem है आपके साथ.
We'll talk about your third book, which was The Machine is Learning. And the machine indeed has learned in all these years. Now, things are changing. Probably a lot of people are looking at job losses. Probably a lot of them are saying that, यार मतलब अब तो एंकर भी AI हो गया है, तो हमारी जॉब्स, तो मीडिया इंडस्ट्री वाले लोग बोल रहे हैं तो हमारी जॉब चली गई, राइटर्स बोल रहे हैं हम क्या करें, कोडर्स बोल रहे हैं पहले तो इन्फोसिस वाले फिर भी 3 लाख में लेते थे, अब तो उनको भी पता चल गया ChatGPT कोड लिख के दे रहा है. सो अब क्या होने वाला है? व्हाट इज़ योर assumption?
Absolute disaster. And countries like India, which have a penchant for actually, which take pride in being digitally ahead of even the West, they will suffer the worst of it, right? Because हमको हमारा legal framework यूरोप के जैसा evolve करता नहीं है कभी भी, ठीक है? तो हम खुला छोड़ देंगे और हम ये adopt करना सबसे पहले चालू कर देंगे और हमारे यहाँ जॉब लॉसेज होंगे और हमारे यहाँ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट की तो जो सिचुएशन कांग्रेस वाले कहते हैं, मुझे पता नहीं सच है या झूठ है, पर अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट की सिचुएशन लगता है कि है, एटलीस्ट हरियाणा में तो है, राइट? आपने यू वुड हैव ऑल interacted with ChatGPT, right? You add a veracity layer to it, right? In some way, find a way to add a veracity layer to it. Either maybe Google Bard will do it through their Google search, right? Because in search, they have a way to sort of prioritize the links which seem truer, right? So if Google Bard or maybe OpenAI, क्योंकि वो उससे पूछोगे तनुज सोलंकी के बारे में कुछ बताओ तो बोलता है कि 1988 में रोहतक में पैदा हुआ है, ChatGPT, right? Now, if ChatGPT becomes accurate, then it's a nightmare. Because आपके कईयों के असाइनमेंट तो ChatGPT ने लिखे 100%. IIM अहमदाबाद के एक प्रोफेसर हैं जो मेरे दोस्त हैं, उन्होंने मेरे को बताया कि it has become a real problem. ChatGPT written assignments are an absolute problem even in IIM Ahmedabad. I'm not going to lesser B schools. Okay, they are a problem in schools. So ChatGPT is going to have an impact on learning. It is going to have an impact on jobs. And frankly, when you finish your MBAs, get into jobs, or some of you would have had some work experience, you realize that a lot of your job is actually very basic. यार VLOOKUP करना है Excel में, तो उसके लिए आपकी ज़रूरत अब नहीं होगी sadly. I think there is going to be absolute mayhem. You might just be the last sort of generation that can sneak in with some sort of a career. Otherwise, I am very, very pessimistic, and we will actually have to ban the thing. Otherwise, there's no.
So, हमारा conversation will end on an optimistic note, probably. I'm still saying probably. आप इनको बताओ फिर वो upskill कैसे करें? How do they make sure that जो वो कर रहे हैं, they do it better? What are the kind of things that you think will help them in their career so that they can foresee the time that's coming and make sure कि हाँ गलतियाँ जो हमसे हो सकती है वो ना हो?
I'll try to be optimistic, although it's very difficult even to upskill. Right? When you're fighting against a machine, it's going to be difficult. If you are not engaged or not spending a certain number of hours in a new endeavor, then it's a problem, right? It was not so much a problem in my time, or it's still my time. When I was in my 20s, it was not so much of a problem, right? But I think if you are not exposed to the arts, for example, right? If you're a blunt desi as far as arts go, तुम्हें पता ही नहीं है Cézanne कौन है versus Monet कौन है, for example, right? Whether it's painting, whether it's literature, etc. Or it is something else. Maybe it is code itself, right? It is Python or it is AI or something like that. So there are two options available, right? Either I become a creative person of the kind and creative in a way that it is always going to be difficult for machines to replicate, right? Either find that or join the AI revolution, become a part of it. Managerial decision making की marginal utility will reduce now, right? So some managers have this Midas touch कि यार जहाँ हाथ लगाता है ये बंदा जहाँ CEO बनता है वहाँ पैसा बरसने लग जाता है. It is true, it is going to remain true for maybe a couple of more decades, but its value will decline, right? Because the ability to take even micro decisions based on data is going to increase, right? And if data is available, then the machine is going to take the decision, yeah, what do we need the guy for? So managerial education, all of you have entered managerial education. That is why I said you're probably the last generation that will reap some benefit out of it. But you need to become a bit of either a technical guy or an artsy sort. Managerial sorts का तो बहुत लंबा नहीं है.
Do you think that these particular cohort that's sitting right in front of us, they're going to be unwillingly or willingly be part of the corporate rat race from here on?
So some of you would come from business families, right? If you can't start your own business or you can't produce art, then of course you're in the rat race, right? And rat race में चूहा नहीं बनता आदमी. There are ways to enjoy the rat race also. ठीक है? If you put limits around, या 9 बजे के बाद फ़ोन नहीं उठाऊंगा मैं, या 7 बजे के बाद नहीं उठाऊंगा, ठीक है? There is an impact in your overall income, what you will earn in 35 years of career. There will be an impact. But if you're okay to bear that impact, then it's fine. You need to know what type you are, right? So आप पैसा कैसे खर्च करते हो और जब पैसा आप कमाते हो तो आपकी फीलिंग क्या होती है? आप will you go for the old tax regime which will save you 10,000 rupees or will you say यार नहीं है चल यूँ में करते हैं 10,000 रुपये साल के क्या फ़र्क पड़ता है? I'm not saying one is good or bad. These are personality types. You can't really easily change them, but you have to know which type you are.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. In the interest of time, I'm just opening the house for questions. I think they have heard you for over an hour. They know the kind of personality that you are.
So you told us about the two personality types. So yeah, I always hear like post my undergrad, like I'm currently working. So I currently have this dilemma: should I go for the convenience and should I save money? And like you talked about. So how one should exercise that? Like I'm this personality type. Like I'm constantly in the dilemma between these two.
I think, do you check the bill when you go to a restaurant?
Sorry?
Are you in the habit of checking the bill?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's some sort of a hint. No? Do you check what is the service charge?
Yes.
Right? Now again, you have to check the fact that whether you are doing that because maybe you earn what you earn, you are at a life stage where this 10% or 5% is important. Right? वो बाद में 10 साल बाद बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग होगा. 10 साल बाद इनकम हाई होगी, 5,000 रुपये का रेस्टोरेंट का बिल आएगा. अब आप देखोगे वो 700 रुपये सर्विस चार्ज में है या नहीं देखोगे, वो आपका पर्सनैलिटी टाइप है. आज इसके दूसरे तरीके होंगे इसको जज करने के लिए. हाउ डू यू व्यू एक्सपेंस हॉस्टल में फॉर एग्जाम्पल, राइट? सम पीपल आर चिंदी, दे गेट द टैग दैट दे आर चिंदी. यार ये तो समोसा भी छीन के खा लेगा दूसरे आदमी का. सम आर नॉट, राइट? And sometimes the difference in incomes, which is actually parental dole-outs, right? The income is not very high. हर आदमी को 4-5 हज़ार रुपये मिलता महीने का. That is a clue. How are you in situations when you're surrounded by peers, where all of them basically make the same amount of money or have the same leeway to spend? Are you the spender? Do you hold yourself back? How do you take these decisions? तो वो अपने आप को ही observe करना है आपको. And what this will mean is that small differentials of saving. Today it is saving, but small differentials of income may also not matter to you, yes. Right? So which means that आप परसेंटेज पे इनकम डिसीजन नहीं लोगे. आपको कल जॉब 25 लाख का मिले या 27 लाख का मिले, आपके लिए शायद मैटर ही नहीं करेगा वो चीज़, राइट? दैट मीन्स समथिंग, राइट? विच इज टू से दैट देयरफॉर द 25 एंड 27 लाख का कंपैरिजन टुमारो यू विल हैव टू डू ऑन सम अदर पैरामीटर बिकॉज अदरवाइज दे आर द सेम फॉर यू. फॉर समवन एल्स इन द रूम that might be यार 27 is bigger than 25. No, it's a no-brainer. I'm going there. right? So that is what I meant.
Hi Paul, hi Tanuj. So my question is that how do you see the future of Indian politics and involvement of people from IIT and IIM in Indian politics, not specifically contesting elections, but the back end part like strategy and research?
I keep hearing that it's the analytics portion has become quite complex, and I keep hearing, I don't know a great deal about it, that there are jobs now available for good talent pool. अब वो IIT IIM से हो या कहीं और से हो, that is beside the point, right? But उससे politics change हो जाएगा is a bit too much to expect, right? Because IIT IIM guys marketing कर रहे हैं 70 साल से, right? Has marketing become more ethical? Has sales become more ethical? Has anything become more ethical? So to say that, oh, there will be more intelligent minds in politics and somehow it will make politics more ethical. BJP, let's say, has employed a great analytics desk बना दिया उसने, ठीक है? और उसमें बैठे हैं लोग, which are churning out constituency level data कि क्या bifurcation है जी, कहाँ किस तरह का campaign लगेगा, for example. Then the other party has to do it, no? So it's basically competition. It doesn't lead to outcomes which are going to be social equality outcomes, which are going to be economic equality outcomes. Those outcomes are not related to IIT IIM people being there or not. They do a certain function, yeah. They report to whoever they report to.
Hello sir, so as you mentioned that you had a coding background before doing an MBA, so has that helped you in any way over your peers that you had a coding background, or in any other way it has helped you at Kotak?
So the work I do at Kotak, it is the bridge between business functions and tech, right? Now, what I had to learn was how business functions operate in life insurance. But there is always a trade-off, right? अब business वाले को 10 feature चाहिए, use वो 2 ही करेगा, right? और IT वाले का अलग, tech वाले का अलग trade-off है कि यार उसको इतना time लगेगा, उतना time लगेगा. Now, as someone who understands the software development life cycle, or will understand how agile works or how these things work, right? And what actually goes into testing code. So it helps to deal with these trade-offs better. And as I said, either be artsy or techie. If you have a tech background, you shouldn't lose it, right? Many people go to MBA precisely because they want to escape technology, right? कि यार नहीं होगा यार अपने से engineering. But अगर आपके पास accidentally or otherwise वो चीज़ है कि you are an engineer, right? Or you have had some experience in software development, don't lose it, because उसकी value possibly MBA से ज़्यादा है over after 5-10 years.
Hi Tanuj. So my question is that there is a lot of hype around product management these days. So do you think that will AI make product managers obsolete?
खुश हो जाएंगे कुछ प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर तो अगर उनका थोड़ा काम AI कर दे, because a product manager is basically a euphemism for everything, right? A product manager has to, it's a very, very tough job without really any limits as to what is expected of a product manager. BA के बहुत जॉब का लिमिट सेट है, टेस्टिंग का सेट है, प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर का सेट नहीं है, वो बिजनेस के आउटकम, तो प्रोडक्ट में ऐसा वेग रोल AI कुछ नहीं कर पाएगा. So I don't think product manager roles are at this point under any sort of threat.
Superb. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that people who are watching this, listening to this, find some value in it, find, the kind of thinking, the kind of ideology that they believe in, thinking from the perspective of what future lies, and make some decisions from this particular session. Thank you very much. Give him a big round of applause.